gods of Olympus have abandoned me. Now there is no hope.
Kratos. Just saying the name brings back a very specific kind of PS2 era, rage-filled memory for a lot of us. I spent years with this franchise, and today I'm ranking all 9 God of War games, worst to best. Let's get into it. We are kicking off with the one entry most fans forget even exists, God of War Betrayal, released in 2007. This was a 2D side-scroller made exclusively for mobile games, flip phones, not smartphones. Story-wise, it slots directly between the first God of War and God of War 2. Kratos gets framed for killing Hera's pet monster, Argos, and spends the whole game hunting down whoever set him up, which eventually leads him to Hermes' son, Cerex. It's a short, self-contained detour, but Santa Monica Studio confirmed it's fully canon. What made it stand out at the time was purely technical. Nobody expected a flip phone to run something that captured God of War's brutality at all, even at a rough, choppy frame rate. But let's be honest, almost nobody actually played this one. It was never released on a single PlayStation console. It's maybe 2 hours long, and it's basically been wiped from the cultural memory of this franchise. Respect for what they pulled off technically. But as an entry in this ranking, it's easiest number 9 on this list. Okay, quick side note. While we're on the subject of the series 2D experiments, War Sons of Sparta dropped completely out of nowhere on PS5. It's a 2D pixel art Metroidvania following a young Kratos training alongside his brother Deimos during the brutal Spartan agoge. Critically, it's actually the lowest reviewed game in the franchise history, and even the original series creator David Jaffe publicly said it doesn't respect the license. But this is the twist, it still outsold Ghost of Yotei and Spider-Man 2 that month, and even beat GTA 5 on the PlayStation charts. So mixed reviews, but clearly a lot of people are playing it anyway. Let me know in the comments where you personally rank it.
He is mine! I will take care of this!
Number 8 is God of War Ascension. If you go on Reddit and ask God of War fans which mainline console is the weakest, this is the answer, 9 times out of 10. This is prequel, set before the very first game, built around a moment we'd never seen before. Kratos trying to break his blood oath to Ares. For that betrayal, he's captured and tortured by 3 sisters called the Furies, Megara, Tisiphone, and Alecto, inside a prison that punishes oath breakers. The whole game is Kratos clawing his way out, while his grip on sanity starts slipping, which was genuinely new angle of the series to explore. The opening fight against Megara, while a 100-armed giant called Aegon is mutating around you, is one of the most chaotic boss intros in the series. And the final fight, where Alecto turns into Kraken-like sea monster, still looks great. The problem is everything in between. Sometimes camera angles so far, you barely see your character what's going on while you're playing. It's really frustrating sometimes. And Sony bolted on a multiplayer mode that nobody asked for, and barely anybody played, and despite the strong premise, the story doesn't really move the needle. Kratos ends this game in basically the same emotional place he started. It sold around 3 million copies, solid of the series, but critically and narratively, most people agree this is the weakest full console entry Santa Monica ever made. Number 7, and we are jumping to the PSP with God of War Chains of Olympus. This one honestly shocked people back in 2008. Nobody expected a handheld system to run a God of War game that looked and played this close to the PS2 originals. The story has Kratos summoned by the gods.
Olympus has sent a message, and I am here to deliver it.
To help the Titan Atlas, who's struggling to hold up the sky, but it spirals into Kratos descending into the underworld to save the sun god Helios. Along the way, he meets a young girl named Calliope in the fields of Elysium, and that relationship gives the game quieter, more personal core underneath all the mythological chaos. Calliope is the daughter of Kratos, who killed by his own father in God of War 1. There was the first time you see father figure in God of War series. You open the game fighting the Basilisk and close it against Persephone, queen of the underworld, and it sold over 3 million copies, which is massive for a handheld exclusive. It just doesn't have quite the scale or the narrative punch of what came after. It's a shorter, tighter experience by design. Great game, just outclassed by bigger entries on this list.
By the gods, what have I become?
Number 6 is God of War Ghost of Sparta, the second and final PSP entry. And this is where the story actually gets deeper than Chains of Olympus. This game sends Kratos back to Sparta itself, chasing visions of his mother and digging into the part of his past nobody had touched before. And it drops one of the biggest reveals in the whole series along the way. Kratos finding out he has a brother, Deimos, who was taken by the gods when they were children. The final boss fight against Thanatos, god of death, is one I still remember clearly. It starts as a normal fight, but the moment Thanatos kills Deimos right in front of you, Kratos just loses it, and the whole tone of the fight shifts into pure rage.
Deimos!
That emotional gut punch is what elevates this above Chains of Olympus for me. Sales-wise, it's actually undersold compared to its predecessor. A lot of people point to PSP piracy being rampant by 2010, but critically this is considered one of the best PSP games ever made, full stop.
Oh, beast! I will send you back to the depths of Hades!
Number 5, and this is the one that started everything, the original God of War on PS2. The premises alone was different from anything on PS2 at the time. Kratos is a Spartan general serving the Olympian gods, tricked by Ares into slaughtering his own wife and daughter, covered in their ashes and haunted by nightmares. He becomes the Ghost of Sparta, searching for a way to wipe away his past by opening Pandora's box, and uses its power to kill the god who ruined him. The opening fight against the Hydra, where you impale the main head on the mast of the ship, was unlike anything else on the console, and the ending, a brutal 3-part fight against Ares himself. It's still one of the longest, most punishing final boss sequences in the whole series. It sold over 4.6 million copies and picked up more Game of the Year awards than I can list. Every conversation I seen online, whether it's Reddit or all Game Facts threads, agrees this was one of the best action games the PS2 ever had. But playing it today, next to what this series became, it feels like that rough draft. The combat's simpler, the scale is smaller, and there's none of the emotional depth the later games built in. But that was the game, and who made God of War name that big? It's the foundation everything else stand on.
Thank the gods you came back for me!
I didn't come back for you. Zeus! Your son has returned. I bring the destruction of Olympus!
Number 4 is God of War 3, and this is where the trilogy goes absolutely massive. Picking up right where God of War 2's cliffhanger left off, Kratos is riding the Titan Gaia up Mount Olympus at the head of a full-blown war against the gods. This is the game where Kratos fully becomes the villain of his own story. He's not just fighting for revenge anymore, he's tearing the entire pantheon apart, and the game doesn't shy from making that feel genuinely monstrous at points. Boss after boss gets thrown at you. Poseidon rising out of the ocean as a giant water construct. Hades ripping soul out of bodies. Kronos, an actual titan you climb around like a piece of the environment. And then there's Hercules. Everyone who played this remembers standing over a beaten Hercules, mashing the circle button to cave his face in with the Nemean cestus. It's brutal and it's iconic. The ending where you finally kill Zeus in first person view closes out the entire original trilogy. It sold over 5 million copies at launch and has has crossed 10 millions with the remaster, the best-selling entry of the original Greek trilogy. For a lot of PS3 era fans, this is peak God of War. For me, it's incredible, just a notch below what's still ahead of this list.
Help guide you on your journey to the flame.
No! Why did you do that? What was it all for? You choose to be nothing!
Number 3, and we are jumping ahead to God of War Ragnarök, the sequel to the 2018 reboot. This one picks up during Fimbulwinter, the endless winter that's supposed to signal the start of the Ragnarok itself. Kratos and Atreus have to travel across all 9 realms, dealing with the fallout of Atreus, discovering he's actually the Norse trickster god Loki, while an apocalypse that could kill them both closes in. It's less about one big villain and more about a father and son trying to figure out whether fate can actually be changed. This game sold 5 million copies in its first week alone, the fastest selling first party PlayStation launch in history at the time, and it's gone on to sell over 15 million. It's also swept the Game Awards with 6 trophies. The Thor fight is everything you want from a god versus god brawl, heavy, thunderous, genuinely intimidating, and Odin as this deceptively friendly, manipulative old man who turns terrifying. It's one of the best final antagonists in the series. My only real criticism, I've seen this echoed a lot in fan discussions online, is that this game is trying to wrap up an entire trilogy worth of story in a single sequel. It gets a little bloated, juggling every character's arc at once. Still an incredible game, just not quite as tightly focused as what's above it.
Droughtness. What do you think? Just take that and do your damn job.
What are you doing? Now its guard is up. Only fire. Only fire when I tell you to fire.
I'm sorry.
Do not be sorry. Be better.
Number 2 is the God of War 2018 reboot, and this is the game that completely reinvented what God of War could be. Years after the Greek saga, Kratos is living quietly in the North wilds with a son, Atreus, and a wife, Faye, who's just died. The whole game is framed as one journey, carrying her ashes to the highest peak in all the realms, while Kratos struggling with how much of his violent past to hide from his son, and what kind of father he actually wants to be, trading the blades of chaos for the Leviathan axe, and slowing the camera down into the single unbroken shot for the entire game was Santa Monica Studio betting everything on reinvented, and it paid off. It sold 10 million copies in its first year alone, and it grossed 23 million total, making it the best-selling entry in the entire franchise by the console figures. And the boulder fights are some of the best boss encounters in the series, not because of scale, but because it's the first time it's what about how he overpowered Kratos, and in the end fight, it's the first time Atreus is actually fighting alongside you, watching each other's back, and the reveal of who Baldur really is and why he can't be hurt at all is one of the best twists this franchise has pulled off. And the Valkyrie fights that were the best side bosses, he really enjoyed that. It won Game of the Year practically everywhere in 2018. If you ask most people online which God of War reinvented the series for the better, this is the answer.
Face me, coward! I am through doing the bidding of the gods! Come down here and face me now, Zeus!
And number 1, and this is the PS2 pick, yes, is God of War 2. This picks up right after Kratos becomes the new God of War, only for Zeus to betray him almost immediately, stripping his power and leaving him for dead because he sees Kratos as a threat to Olympus. The entire game is Kratos hunting down the Sisters of Fate, hoping to literally rewrite the past and undo his own death. It's also the more boss fights compared to God of War 1, and it ends with him leading an army of titans in open war against the gods, setting up everywhere God of War 3 would pay off. The opening fight against the Colossus of Rhodes is to this day one of the ambitious set pieces the PS2 ever ran. You climbing a moving bronze giant through an entire city while it tries to kill you, seamlessly blending pure combat, platforming, and some of the most satisfying quick time finishers in gaming history. It sold 4.2 million copies, was the best-selling game in the UK the week it launched, and both IGN and GameSpot still call it the true song of the PS2 era. Complex.com went as far as ranking it the single best PS2 game ever made, ahead of God of War 3. For me, it's the moment this franchise figured out exactly what it wanted to be. Bigger bosses, tighter combat, a genuinely brutal ending where Zeus' betrayal actually reshapes the entire trilogy going forward. Every PS2 memory I have of this series traces back to this game. That's why it's number 1.
The time of the gods has come to an end!
And now, God of War Laufey. This one is a genuinely big deal. For the first time in the franchise history, you're not playing as Kratos. You're playing as Faye, Kratos' wife, and Atreus' mother, whose death sets up the events of the 2018 game. Laufey is a new mainline chapter focused on what happened to Faye after her death. The story takes place in the afterlife, a realm called the Everyone, where gods from different mythologies are fighting for power. Faye has her own combat style built around speed, mobility, and precision, giving the game a noticeably different feel from Kratos' recent adventures. Also, they gave Kratos double jump, and now we finally have a release date. God of War Laufey launches on February 16, 2027, exclusively on PS5. But the bigger surprise is what comes after it. Sony Santa Monica Studio has confirmed that another God of War game starring Kratos is already in development, and it will directly connect to the events of Laufey. We don't have a title, release date, or much else yet, but that means Laufey isn't just a side story, it's setting up what's next for Kratos, and honestly that makes this game a lot more interesting. So that's my ranking. All 9 God of War games, worst to best, based on what actually stuck with me after playing every one of them. It's just my opinion. Now I want to hear from you. Is God of War 2 really the best in the series for you? Or is it 2018? And be honest, did Ascension really deserve to sit that low? Drop your own ranking in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe the channel for more future videos. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Keep gaming.